Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the After School Dawah YouTube channel, where we talk about social issues in the Muslim community and around the world. So if you're into that, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. So today we are joined by a very special guest, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But before we go on to that, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who subscribed to the YouTube channel. In the last 2 days, we got over 120 new subscribers, and right now we're over 200 subscribers, which is crazy. So Jazakallah khair to everyone who subscribed. I hope you all enjoy and find the content we produce beneficial. In today's video, we have, like I said, a very special guest. His name is Tahib, but a few years back, he was also known as Tyler. And the reason for that is because he converted to Islam a few years ago, and today we have him with us. Right now he runs a YouTube channel where he gives tips and advice to new converts, and where he talks about social issues in the Muslim community, sort of like what we're doing right here on this YouTube channel. So we had a chance to grab him and really get to talk to him about his experiences, what his life was like before he converted, why did he convert, and what was the challenges and struggles and experiences in his life after he converted to Islam, like with his family, with marriage, and all of this good stuff. So if you want to listen to that, then please stay tuned. But yeah, with that said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakallahu khair for subscribing to the YouTube channel, and please do continue to support us. So if you don't mind, I wanted to actually ask you about your sort of convert or revert story. Yeah.
Yeah, no, alhamdulillah, it's fine. I guess, do you have any specific questions in mind, or do you want me to just...
I'll ask, and feel free to, answer whichever way you wish. I guess the first thing would be, if you don't mind, what was your name before Tahib?
Tyler.
Tyler?
Yeah.
Okay. I can see why you chose Tahib then. Both figures were like a T.
That's
Tyler.
what the Imam said to do, just so it's easier to remember.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Legally, I haven't changed my name just because, like I say, Islamically, I'm not required to.
Yeah, 100%.
So
100%.
it's a bit of a pain going through a legal name change, because that means I've got to get like every legal document I've ever had changed as well. And
no, 100%. Like honestly, like obviously from the Islamic perspective of it, it's like unless your main literally means something that is bad, or it has a very negative connotation to it, then you'll have to change it. But otherwise, if it's like Tyler or David or something like that, there's no real need to.
Yeah, of course.
But of course, you changed your sort of public name to Tahib.
Yeah.
So when was it? When did you revert? How many years ago was it?
It was 4 years on July 29th.
4 years on July 29th.
Yeah.
Wow.
July,
4 years ago. So that was 2016, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So would you mind like going through the story of like what made you think about Islam? What was the reasons behind the initial thoughts, and then what actually made you think, this is what I want to do. This is the religion I want to accept.
I guess if you don't mind, I kind of have to start from the very beginning.
Honestly,
really.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So obviously, I was born in the UK. I lived here till I was about 10, almost 11. And during that time also, I went through primary school. And the two things I kind of remember about that was obviously my parents telling me that in life you're going to meet all sorts of people with all sorts of different skin tones, black, white, brown, red, yellow, or purple with orange spots. It doesn't matter. Treat everyone equally.
Yeah.
Unless they're purple with orange spots, then keep your distance. But,
yeah, probably a good idea.
But and then I remember when we studied religious education, because where I grew up I grew up in a small village called West End, which is just outside of Southampton. I can probably count on one hand how many non-white people I ever saw. So when we studied like Islam, for example, in religious education, the only thing I can really remember of it was like they were like, oh, Muslims believe in Allah and then they have Muhammad. And so we're like, oh, okay, Muhammad's like their Jesus. And they were like, yeah, sure. Because obviously it wasn't a Muslim who was teaching us this, and we were probably younger than 10 years old at the time.
Yeah.
So they obviously probably didn't need to go into the difference. And obviously none of us were Muslim.
Yeah.
So, but after that, I ended up moving to America. My parents emigrated at the time. So, yeah, I lived in Florida for about 12 years.
Right.
So, obviously, I grew up there. I finished off all my schooling through there. And through there, obviously, I met new friends. I met Hispanic people for the first time, which obviously growing up in a small village in the UK without ever really looking at a map of the world, I didn't know where half these countries even were at the time. So obviously, yeah, that definitely expanded my mind in that case. But which was fun. I got to experience a lot of new things. I learned Spanish through it. Like I said, I got to experience a whole new culture, a whole new way of life. But it was funny because during this time is when I started paying attention to what was going back on in the UK. And it was after 2012, because that's when I left school. So between 2012 and 2015, that's when I heard about the EDL and Britain First and everything going on there. And it was quite ironic when you look at it, when I look at it now compared to how it was back then. Because when I first heard about them, I completely agreed with everything that they said. I wasn't racist. I wasn't particularly Islamophobic in any way. But it was because the way they came across on Facebook actually sounded quite, I don't want to say good, but professional in a sense.
Right, yeah.
Because they were saying things like, we do not want Islamic extremists in this country. Well, no one wants Islamic extremists. Yeah. We want the death penalty for rapists and paedophiles. Well, I agree with that. I still do. We believe the Gurkhas should be given full citizenship under UK law. I also still agree with that. But it wasn't until I actually got back to the UK that I realized that nothing they were saying was actually true. Because they were making it seem like, for example, they would say Birmingham is 100% Muslim. No, it's not.
Yeah.
And they would say the same thing obviously about Manchester, East London.
Yeah, Bradford.
And, basically anywhere that has a high Muslim population is all of a sudden 100% Muslim.
Yeah.
But they were wording it in a sense that was a bad thing as well.
Yeah.
Because they were making it sound like
the Muslims are taking over or something.
Yeah, exactly. And because they were making it sound like, if you go through Heathrow Airport, you have to play spot the white guy. And I believed everything they said right up until I landed at Heathrow when I moved back. And I'm like, yeah, none of this is true.
Yeah.
So obviously that was a big shock. And then at the time when I started, working, trying to support myself, I was in a bad job. I was terrible at it. I was getting depressed because I didn't know anyone, because obviously I spent most of my life in the US. I didn't have any family because I moved back here on my own. So I started drinking a lot. I started getting into drugs to help, and which obviously led to more depression, which then led me to doing more drinking and more drugs. It was quite a vicious cycle, to be fair. And then at the time, so this is about it's probably about early 2016 at this point.
Yeah.
Because I moved back in October of 2015. So I'm sorry if I bounce around a lot.
Yeah, no worries.
It's all right. No worries.
And I think it was something made me think of the Paris attacks, because I was looking into different religions and different spiritualities anyway, because I was thinking there's got to be more to life than just working a 9 to 5 and then partying on the weekend and then someday getting married and having kids and then you die. That can't be all there is.
Yeah.
So I was looking into different religions, I was looking into Buddhism, I was looking into Christianity and everything. And something made me think of the Paris attacks. And I was thinking, well, hang on a minute, I've met Muslims in the street and they've never tried to kill me. So why does ISIS do what they do?
Yeah.
So I started watching all the YouTube documentaries on ISIS, that Vice had done and everything. And they were quoting things like, oh, this hadith says this and this surah says this. And I'm like, well, I don't even know what a hadith is. So I started saying, well, I'll just learn about Islam in general, and then just to kind of get my knowledge up and then just go from there.
Yeah.
So when I started learning about Islam in general, I remember 2 documentaries I watched was Inside Islam, which was by, I think, Nat Geo, and Empire of Faith, which I think both of them are still on YouTube now. And when I started looking into it and realized what Muslims actually believe in, I was like, actually, this makes a lot of sense, because I was never particularly religious before. I only prayed whenever I wanted something, basically.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of Muslims do that too.
But yeah, subhanallah. But where was I? So yeah, we'll have to edit this part out.
Yeah.
No worries, no worries.
Oh yeah. So when I started looking into it, like when he said, we believe in God, we believe He's the same God as the Christians and the Jews. We believe that He's creator of all things, and the only really difference is that we don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. We believe He was a prophet and a messenger of God. And I was like, well, yeah, to be fair, that makes sense, because the Trinity has never made sense for me at all. It's something I followed along with because I had no other influences to look at.
Yeah.
And I don't even define myself as a ex-Christian. I define myself as an ex-Christian,
Right.
because I believed in God, I believed in Jesus, and that was about as far as it went. So that was the only way I know how to define my religious beliefs.
Yeah, it was more like a Christian by name.
Yeah, than Christian by nature. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when I started looking into it, I was like, a lot of this actually makes a lot of sense. And then I wanted to keep learning more and more and more. And as I was looking into it, I got this really warm, happy feeling in my heart of pure joy and happiness. And to be fair, if I could bottle that feeling up, I would be able to give world peace in a week. Like, I've never felt like that before.
Yeah.
And I've read to me, I was like, this is what I need to do with my life. This is the way I need to take my life in the direction I need to take it in. So I decided right then, I said I was going to stop drinking. I was going to stop eating pork, because I said, if I can't do those, then there's no point in me becoming Muslim. So I did that for 2 weeks and it was fine. Actually, giving up pork was harder than giving up alcohol was.
Oh, really?
Right.
Because I was never a massive drinker anyway, like 3 pints and that was my limit. I was on the floor.
Yeah.
So whereas I grew up eating bacon, hot dogs, pork sandwiches and all sorts. So yeah, and ironically enough, even today, I still miss the taste, because without trying to corrupt anyone or anything like that, it does taste good.
Yeah.
I didn't become Muslim when my taste buds changed. I gave it up because Allah said I have to. So yeah, because if Allah came down now and said, actually, pork's fine, I'll be like, right, bacon sandwiches on me then, let's do it. But yeah, anyway, alhamdulillah. But yeah, so I got in touch with the local Islamic Society at the Uni of Southampton and said, look, I'm interested in becoming Muslim. How do I go about this? They got me in touch with the local mosque, and I went down there, and I was terrified about going into the mosque because it wasn't that I bought all the media hype or anything like that, but because all I could see outside of it was nothing but women. I guess they just left prayer.
Yeah.
And all I knew about Islam at that point is do not speak to the women if you're not married to them. So I was waiting for them to leave.
So you have to maneuver yourself around them. Make sure don't touch anyone accidentally. Yeah.
So I'm waiting, because the mosque is inside a little courtyard. So I'm waiting outside of the gate. At this point in time, I used to have a completely shaved head. Well, I still kind of do. And I was nervous, so I was chain smoking as well. Yeah. But all I could see out of like the corner of my eye is like all the dads and the brothers and everyone waiting to pick up their female relatives. And all they were doing was watching me staring at the sisters, wondering why is a skinhead standing outside of a mosque. But yeah, obviously they left. I went in. I said, I'm here to learn about Islam, to speak to the Imam. And the guy I was speaking to, he had quite a strong accent, but he said, very welcome, please come in. So I sat down and I spoke with the Imam. And the thing that actually shocked me is A, that he was young, and B, that he had a British accent.
Yeah, I remember seeing that video, yeah.
I was expecting him to be some 70-year-old sheikh fresh off a plane from Pakistan. Because especially within, let's say, Christianity, a lot of like religious leaders, religious scholars, etc., are a lot older. I wasn't expecting him to be a few years older than me.
Yeah.
So that was what like freaked me out the first time. And then when he started talking to me about Islam, like obviously all of my, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like stereotypes, if you will, that I had in my head were blown away.
SubhanAllah.
And alhamdulillah, that's a very good thing, but it's a very weird thing when all of your previously held beliefs are non-existent.
Yeah.
So, and it actually, for a split second, it actually leaves you with a very empty feeling inside, because then now you're like, well, what now? And that's when I started to fill it with the truth, if you will. both
Yeah.
in Islamic sense and in a general sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate that the Imams are Liverpool supporters, so I'll never be able to trust him completely. But other than that, yeah, subhanAllah, he's fine.
Yeah.
And then basically for 2 months straight, I was going back to the mosque. I was reading Quran. I was going there for like on the weekends for like probably from 7 in the evening to about 11 o'clock at night, just reading Quran. Because while I was there, they all stood up to pray. And so when obviously the Imam went to lead the prayer, and someone looked back at me and just kind of beckoned me over, so I went and joined him in the row, and he just said, "Just follow along with exactly what we do." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So yeah, my first time in the mosque was actually the first time I prayed.
Oh,
wow.
And then obviously I met friends through that, and they asked me about it. And he gave me like a load of stuff. He gave me, some prayer hats, a prayer rug, a couple of books, and I still, ironically enough, I still have those prayer hats, the prayer rug today. And he gave me like a glossary with a load of Islamic terms on it, which really helped. And he gave me a biography of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. I'm sad to say it was only just recently now that I've actually been able to read it all the way through. But yeah, so then I started to, like I say, going back to the mosque every day. I was praying at home as well. But it wasn't until about 2 months after that I was like, actually, I probably should take my Shahada at some point. Because even though I was praying, I was doing, I guess, all the Muslim stuff I kind of needed to, for lack of a better term. I hadn't publicly accepted Islam yet. And I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. If I die like that, I actually don't know where I'm going to end up. Because even though I'm doing all the things that a Muslim should do, I haven't actually said that I'm going to be Muslim yet.
Yeah.
And that was one of the ways that Shaitan would kind of get to me, because I would miss prayer, for example.
Yeah.
And Shaitan would say, well, you're not actually a Muslim yet. It doesn't count. So, but yeah, so obviously after that, I called up my friend Yaz, who picked me up, took me to the mosque, and I took my Shahada, which is obviously the video that you can see on my channel.
Yeah. And was that the same Imam that initially, like...
Yeah. Same one, Rizwan Hussein Al-Azhari.
Yeah.
His name.
Do you still keep in contact with them?
Yeah, every so often. The mosque is only it's only recently opened back up again because of the COVID restrictions. But at the time where I was living, it was like a 45-minute walk to the mosque, so I used to walk there at times. Whereas now I live slightly further north, so now it's a lot more difficult for me to get down there. So unfortunately, I don't go to mosque nearly as much as I should be. Excuse me. And then obviously with all the COVID restrictions and everything,
it makes it much harder.
So, but obviously I still, luckily with my job and everything, I can still pray while I'm at work.
Right.
Because that was probably one of the hardest things as well, is like working in 9 to 5, praying 5 times a day, especially in the summer when Fajr is at like 2 o'clock in the morning, but Isha the night before is at like 10:30.
Yeah.
So you're not getting enough sleep. So it was getting to the point where I was missing Fajr basically every day and then praying it when I woke up.
Yeah.
So whereas now it's a lot easier because I'm still at work until 6 in the morning, and the latest Fajr will ever be at winter is probably 5:30.
5:30, yeah.
So I'm going to have all the time in the world to be able to pray it. So alhamdulillah, that's what kind of makes it better for me at least.
And if you don't mind, can I just like pose some questions to you based on what you've told me about? So like first of all, of course, like the age-old question of how did your family, friends, etc. react?
My family at first didn't really know.
Right.
I thought I told them because they would just kind of like roll their eyes and said, yeah, it's a phase, it will pass. It turned out they weren't actually listening when I said what I said. Because when they
probably thought you were joking or something.
Because when they actually found out they hit the roof, they were really, really angry. And it's like I say, it's not because they're not racist, they're not Islamophobic, they never have been. The problem is though, is the fact that they've always been very, very conservative. So they're massive Trump supporters. They read the Daily Mail like it's the gospel. You know the type. But another thing as well is while I was living in the States, I got involved in gangs. Not serious or anything. I haven't like killed 20 people or anything like that. But so my parents were worried that, and no pun intended, that I'd gone from one extreme to the other. They were worried that somebody had radicalized me and got me to accept Islam, as opposed to doing it on my own. And so my mum didn't even want to speak to me. My dad barely spoke to me. And the weird thing is all this happened in the space of a day. So eventually I was like, well, I'm basically going to be disowned by my parents. So I just switched my phone off because I needed to charge it, and then I had a lot of missed calls during that time. My mum actually apologized to me. She said, look, I've judged your friends without even meeting them. And so and then we spoke about it. And I said, well, look at it this way. My friends in the States all had prison records. My friends over here all have university degrees. So whereas now amongst my friends in the States, I was like the best of the worst. Now I'm the worst of the best in a sense. So, and I explained it to them that way. And I explained, look, like I'm not drinking anymore. I'm not doing drugs. I'm clean. I'm clean and sober. I'm a better person now because of it. And a few years later, my mum said actually that I'm really proud of you for the way that you've been able to sort your life out. And like I said, my parents have always been atheists, even though they have me and my sister christened. But so they're not really interested in talking about religion. They'll ask me questions or anything, but they don't want to have discussions or debates or anything. So I would never go around there, Quran in hand, trying to convert them. So what I did do is there was a book that I bought called it's like Islam and Introduction, I think. And I just loaned my mum that, and I said, look, if you want to learn about Islam, just read this. If you have any questions, please ask. Because the weird thing was my mum was like, oh, so you don't believe in God anymore? And I was like, yes, I do. And she goes, oh, but you don't believe in like the same type of God? And I was like, no, it's the same type of God. Like, but you don't believe in Jesus? I was like, yes, we do. We just don't believe that he's God. Because I explained it to him, and I was like, well, how can God be the Father but also be the Son, and the Son is the God of the Father? And and she goes, you're right, I have no idea what that means. And I said, exactly. I said, Islam is just, there is God, he's created everything, that's it. That's and then he has his messengers upon the earth, obviously. But and so I explained to him that way, and that they kind of understood. So obviously, inshallah, time will tell.
How has the attitude like? Has it, like, have you talked to them recently? Have they commented on anything on your videos? Maybe on like
they haven't seen my videos yet, because now my parents live back here.
Right. Okay.
So because at the time, like I said, they were still living in America. So obviously, our relationship's gotten a lot better. I'm able to see them a lot more.
That's good.
Because it was getting to the point where before they moved back, I hadn't seen my parents in about 5 years.
Wow.
So that was obviously quite good to see them again. They don't like the fact that I've got a beard. They don't like a beard. They say it makes me look homeless. But,
it's a really nice beard, mashallah.
Oh, thank you. I
love Pakistani Bengali people would kill to have a beard like that. they struggle to grow a beard themselves.
Well, I think that was in one of the ways that I'm kind of lucky as a Revert, and I'll get to that part just in a second. Sorry, I keep looking down. It's because I'm thinking.
Yeah, no worries.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
But so our relationship, alhamdulillah, is a whole lot better. Cut out the part that I just swore. And obviously there are some things that I still do need to change, like I said in my exposure video of myself, where like I swear like a drunk sailor when I'm off camera, when I'm around my non-Muslim friends as well, because that's how they speak. So I tend to change my voice and my inflection depending on who I'm conversing with. Our relationship, like I say, our relationship's a whole lot better. I see them generally probably about once every 2 weeks or so. I speak to them every so often on the phone just to check in with them, make sure they're okay. But yeah, alhamdulillah, everything's fine.
Alhamdulillah. You mentioned your job, right? So how have you found it since becoming Muslim in like career and any aspirations you may have had in your job, or how has that affected that? Have your superiors or seniors said anything about it, or?
At my first job, they did, because I was working there before I was Muslim as well.
Right.
So from their point of view is I came in one day and basically said, I'm Muslim now. I need to start praying 5 times a day.
Yeah. They were probably this guy wants more breaks.
Well, I had to clock out, obviously, to be able to go and pray anyway. So luckily I wasn't doing it on the company's time. Right. So that was a bit strange. My job after that, obviously, I went in as a Muslim, so it was a bit better. But the job that I was first working in was in insurance.
Right.
And one of the things that I was dealing with was payment packs from hire cars companies, which is basically essentially the bill, which if you don't pay it within 30 days, you have to pay interest on.
Right.
And I was speaking to one of the imams at the mosque, and I said, well, am I allowed to do that as a Muslim? Because it involves interest.
Yeah.
And they said, technically, no, because even though it's not your money and you're not charging the customer that, you're still involved in it in some way or form.
Yeah.
So I left that job to go to a energy company. Now it was a halal job in a sense, because I was just helping people top up their meters, but it was not an ethically good job. I did not feel good at the end of the day because there was people that they may not have had enough money to top up their meters, so they had to ask for a loan. And the loans were interest free, but we could only loan them 3 times, because after that they would get into debt.
Right.
And then obviously we potentially would have to send collection companies out, and but I would have people like screaming down the phone at me saying I'm killing their children because I'm not loaning them money. And I'm like, I can hear you smoking over the phone. That pack of cigarette cost you about 10 quid. So, you could have used that to top up your meter. Or they would say like, I've got 10 kids and I'm on benefits. What do you suggest I do? And I had to really resist the urge to say, find another hobby. But, so, I'm actually kind of glad I got fired from that job in the end, because they were really strict on the data protection. So they would score your calls, and if you didn't leave a note, you would automatically get a 0%.
Right.
And so I would forget to leave notes on the call that I took. So that was quite harsh, and that's what kind of got my probation obviously ended.
Yeah.
So I was jobless for about 2 weeks after that, which was quite hard, but that's kind of what helped me gain taqwa as well, because obviously I had no excuse for missing prayers because I had nothing to do.
Yep.
So obviously I was on the dole for a bit. I ended up picking up work in a bar as a glass collector, and I understand obviously that was a haram job. I knew that from before I went in there.
Yeah.
But I was actually asking for forgiveness before I'd even started the job.
Yeah.
Just because, like I say, I needed some way of making money, and that was the only thing I could get. And then, alhamdulillah, McDonald's was hiring, so I ended up working there full time.
Right.
Now there is where, like you said, people thought I was pretending to be Muslim.
Right.
Because at the time, so a couple of years ago, when you worked in McDonald's, you had to be clean shaven unless you had the beard for religious reasons. So when I said, obviously, I'm Muslim, I need to keep the beard, they're like, they couldn't argue with me because obviously that's discrimination, but they did not believe me at all. Like they thought I was pretending that I needed to go and pray just so I could sneak out for a cigarette.
Right. Okay.
And there was a couple of other things as well, like they thought I was lying about me just to keep my beard.
But what do you have any idea why they thought that?
One, because I was a white guy.
Right.
Which is generally the kind of the response that I get from a lot of people. And just a few other reasons as well. But it actually almost got me fired because I worked for the franchise of McDonald's, and like the franchise owner or like his vice president walked in and saw me and was like, why does he have a beard? I want him sacked. And that's when they said, well, he's Muslim, we can't. And then he was like, oh, okay, fair enough. But
right.
Bro, that was like 0 to 100 real quick, man. He was like, yeah, this guy, sack him, we got a beard.
Yeah, exactly. But now, alhamdulillah, they have changed the rules because, and I agree with this as well, because a lot of people are saying, well, hang on a minute, if you can only have a beard if you're religious, that's discrimination against people that aren't.
Yeah.
In a way, and I completely agree with that as well. And so I said, well, look, if there's any petitions that need to be signed, let me know. I'll happily sign it. But yeah, I think they kind of saw the error of their ways and they got it changed.
That's great.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask, like, do you still speak to your old non-Muslim friends?
The ones in the States a little less because of the time difference. The ones over here, the ones that I knew before, yes, I do.
Right.
My mate Shannon, who I've known for over 20 years now, is like a brother to me. I was just at his engagement party over the weekend.
Right, really?
Yeah, because he just got engaged, so that was quite fun. I still see a lot of them. Now that I've gotten older, it's a lot easier. Because when I first said that I was Muslim, everyone just kind of laughed. They're like, but you're a white guy, you can't be Muslim.
Yeah.
But now, obviously, like I say, I'm 27 now, so now people have just kind of learned to accept it. They've realised that it's not really a phase. But yeah, alhamdulillah, everything's, like I say, it's gotten better.
Alhamdulillah. How would you because there's a stigma, especially amongst the Asian Muslim community, where they kind of shy away from giving non-Muslims dawah. So how would you deal with that what advice would you give to people that want to, educate their non-Muslim friends about Islam? They want to give them dawah. They want to tell them the truth about Islam. What would you say?
The first thing I would say is, in regards to like educating people about Islam, is learn all the controversial questions first. So obviously the terrorism related questions, the age of Aisha related questions. Learn the answers to those first, because when I first started telling people I was Muslim, and this is something I've said in one of my videos, is immediately people start asking you questions that you are not going to know the answer to.
Yeah.
Because I've only been Muslim 5 minutes. I have no idea what the answer to that question is. And then they almost look at you weird that you don't know the answer to that question. Like, shouldn't you have figured that out before you became Muslim?
Yeah.
In response to giving dawah specifically, obviously do it through your actions, because whether we like it or not, because for example, where I live, there's not a lot of Muslims. So there's a good chance that I'm the only Muslim some of these people could have ever met. And if they've seen me doing wrong, they're going to think that all Muslims are like that. So you kind of become the unwilling poster child of Islam in that moment. So that's just the way that I kind of look at it in regards to a day-to-day thing. But if you are giving dawah specifically, is focus on Tahib. Because even if you can convince someone to give up pork, it's not hard. You can convince them to give up drinking. Again, it's not hard. But even if they do that, if they don't have Tawheed, then it doesn't matter. It's like studying for your maths test when you've got a history final. Your teacher might say, well, good job on studying for your math test, but that's not going to help you here. So that's the way that I would say, is focus on Tawheed, be a good person, and learn to answer like the controversial questions that are naturally just going to come up.
Just like a couple more questions, and then I'll let Muhammad carry on. Sorry. A bit of a personal one, but have you like tried to get married? Have you found that experience?
I am trying to get married at the moment. I have met someone, alhamdulillah. It's just a matter we should have been married already, really, but COVID and everything kind of got in the way. She's an Indian sister from Birmingham. She's a social worker as well, which, alhamdulillah, is great, because I think she's a hero because of that. But yeah, looking for marriage was quite hard, because like I said, there aren't a lot of Muslims where I live, so I was going on like Muzmatch, Minda, single Muslim, like, every marriage site you can think of, I probably haven't found. And obviously I got a few matches. I met up with some people. It was it was good, but like I say, it just didn't work out for whatever reason. Sometimes it was me, sometimes it was them. So it was quite hard, because obviously I was seeing things like, especially from, and this is going to sound horrifically racist, so forgive me. Like on the profiles from like Bangladeshi sisters, mostly, it was like only swipe right if you're Bangladeshi, but also if you're like Chowdhury. Which I'm assuming is one of the caste systems.
It's one of the caste systems.
And I was like, well, I'm not Bangladeshis, but so I'm pretty sure I don't fit into their caste system anywhere. Is there a security guard caste system in Bangladesh? Hopefully they're near the top. But
I mean, that happens a lot, especially in Asian communities, where they'll just be like, I want someone from this clan or this caste. But that is rare now. It's more to do with, just same ethnicity, really. But like, what would you? Sorry, to cut you off. What advice would you give to Revert brothers that are trying to look to get married?
Just keep looking. That's if Allah's willed it for you, you will find someone. So yeah, you're gonna find the right person eventually. It just might take a lot of time. But yeah, so alhamdulillah, so I'm happy. Inshallah, I'll be getting married either the end of this year or next year.
Are we invited?
Of course.
One final question before Muhammad, I'll pass it to Muhammad. I've noticed in some of the videos, mashallah, obviously you've been around as a Muslim for a while. You've been Muslim for a while, so you've established a good understanding, I would say, of Arabic, the Arabic language, some of the Arabic words you're pronouncing quite properly, mashallah. So have you been trying to learn Arabic? Are you advancing your knowledge in that, or any other like Islamic sciences?
No, To sum it up bluntly.
Right. Okay.
I started learning Arabic at night school, but when I was at the energy company, because it wasn't a set schedule, I couldn't always make the classes.
Right.
But the Arabic was like modern standard Arabic
Yeah.
as opposed to Quranic Arabic.
Yeah.
The way that I learned how to say things like, Alhamdulillah or Mashallah, for example, is just from hearing people say it.
Okay.
The way that I learned Quran at first was I would look up the surah transliteration in English in Google Images.
Mm-hmm.
I would save it, and then I would download the audio from YouTube and just hear the reciter reciting it while I was reading it.
Right.
That was before I found out about Muslim Pro. Now I recommend just use Muslim Pro. It's a lot simpler.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and that's just how I learned. As for Islamic sciences, as and when I do need to do more studying. That's something I do need to pick up on. It's been a while since I've picked up a Quran, to be perfectly honest with you. But I guess history is something that I'm really interested in. So I love learning about the historical side of Islam, like from the Golden Age to the
same, to be
Ottomans.
honest. Yeah, it's really, really interesting period. Yeah, inshallah. Sorry, Mohammed, do you want to continue on?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. So I guess, like, let's say, for someone who obviously isn't a Muslim and they learn about the religion and they're very inclined to the faith, I think one of the there's a few barriers, I guess, but one of the main ones is that they find it very overwhelming. They're like, okay, look, if I become Muslim, if I take my Shahada now, I need to stop praying 5 times a day. I need to stop this. I need to do this. I need to do that. And there's so many different things that you need to do and that you shouldn't do as well. They feel overwhelmed and sort of use that as an excuse to sort of delay giving the Shahada or not even give it at all. What advice would you give to brothers like that and sisters like that?
The delaying the Shahada part, I would say don't, because tomorrow isn't guaranteed. As for like the kind of restrictions about Islam, I would say you focus on Tawheed first, because again, even if you give up pork, give up drinking, give up clubbing, if you don't have Tawheed, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So do it little bit by little bit. I only really started praying 5 times a day quite regularly once I got the job that I'm in now, because it was a lot easier for me to do that. So yeah, everything takes time. You're going to hit obstacles. You're going to have doubts or crises of faith. Don't assume that you have to hit the ground running the moment you accept Islam, because you don't. I mean, without trying to reveal like sins or anything, this past Ramadan was the only Ramadan I've actually been able to complete, because beforehand it was too hard. And like I say, when I accepted Islam right after Ramadan, because I knew that if I accepted it in Ramadan, I'd have to start fasting. So
tactics.
But so really, if you know Islam is the truth, and if you're when you start saying things like, I don't want to do it because I'm afraid my friends will leave me or something like that, that's when you know it is the truth. Because you're just delaying it because of like social issues or social pressure, for example.
Do you have any, sorry to cut you off, do you have any practical advice for people, those Muslim brothers that are going through doubts that you found helpful maybe?
Knowledge. So for example, one thing that I found, because when I was, full of sort of salt and vinegar, if you will, I was like, yeah, I'm Muslim, I'm going to convert everyone that I see, Islam, I was very passionate.
Inshallah.
Is like I would start going into like debates with people on YouTube, in comments and things, and obviously I would get slaughtered in these debates because I would have no knowledge at all. And so what I would say is knowledge is key. So don't because there are some, like, say, verses of the Quran and some hadiths that on the surface look very, very bad, and they can cause you to have doubts. However, just Google what they mean. Look up, the tafsir of the Quranic verses. Look up the explanation of the hadiths, and you'll find it to be a very simple fix. Like when I first heard about the age of Aisha, like for a while, it took me a long time to be able to come to terms with that. I couldn't just accept it as like it's Islam, it's what was done sort of thing. I had to do some serious research, and that almost made me leave Islam in and of itself, because because I was thinking to myself, how can I be a Muslim when the Prophet Islam has done this. And I'm not saying that to insult the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. It was just in my ignorance at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously after looking into it, and obviously some things will take a lot more than just a quick Google to be able to find out the answers to.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, if any doubts you have, Islam will always have an answer to it. And, if you can't read it all at face value, then learn from someone who has the knowledge, learn from a scholar, do some Googling if need be, speak to your friends, because, you're not going to be the only Muslim that has those issues.
100%, I agree. Yeah, I mean, just speaking about myself, I've been trying to get more into kind of studying the more spiritual side of Islam recently. How prayer affects you, how reading Quran affects you, etc., etc. And I find that there's so many parts to Islam that there's obviously the controversial side of Islam which you can learn about. Well, not really controversial, but in the public eye it is. And if you learn about that will increase your faith, of course, because you'll be like, oh, Islam is doing it the proper way. But I think another good route to do it is to learn about the spiritual side, and that will inform you about kind of why and how these things are done. Because for me, it's actually helped me like link certain of actions of mine, like the physical attribute of mine, to my soul. So I'll give you an example, like when you're praying, quick example, the highest part of your body, your head, is on the lowest part of the earth, right? So that is essentially you're humbling your entire body and your entire ego to the one who created you. So just simple stuff like that, learning kind of spiritual stuff like that, how it connects your physical side to your spiritual side, I think it's quite eye-opening.
And that's obviously something that I myself do need to focus a bit more on, because fair enough, yes, I pray 5 times a day, but I do it now more because, well, obviously I know I have to, but because it's a habit that I do, as opposed, so it's kind of like I pray because it's muscle memory more than like I want to pray. And I'm not saying that to be rude or disrespectful. It's something that only comes in time.
That's true.
But,
definitely.
Yeah, so there are times when like I really do need to. I think I need to slow down and I need to focus on what I'm saying, because like there's times when I've been praying and then when I've actually paid attention to what I'm doing, I'm already on the 4th rakat. Because I've just gone through it. The motions. I can relate to that.
100%.
So, but then there's also times where you don't want to think too much about it, because that's when you go, hang on a minute, which rakat am I actually on?
But, confuse yourself.
So, but there's always room for improvement in knowledge. It was only a couple of days ago that I just learned that you don't actually have to say a second surah while you're praying. I didn't know that. I thought it was fard that you have to say after Surah Fatiha you have to say a second one. So that was obviously interesting to learn that, which I really wish I'd known that before, because there's been times where obviously I'm praying a lot later than I should, that I would have been able to fit it in the time period if I would have known that, because it was shaved a couple of minutes off. But, alhamdulillah. But
that's sorry.
Oh, because that was jumping back to my Revert story really quickly. One of the things that kind of helped me with that is when I learned about how easy, because Islam's actually quite easy. It's people that make it hard.
True.
So, because there was a couple of things. I remember, like, obviously certain sunnahs, like smiling, looking down when you walk, for example. All those are sunnahs. Well, without trying to break, I used to do that before anyway. So when I looked into all these like little sunnahs, if you will, for lack of a better term, that you can do, that I already did, it was almost like God created Islam just so I could become Muslim one day, that was a really powerful feeling that he gave me, which helped towards the feeling that I got. But another thing that I would kind of tell people is that, especially when he said like brothers that are trying to do everything all at once, is hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And a man came to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and asked him about Islam. And the Prophet obviously told him what Islam was, about Tawheed, about the 5 pillars that he had to do. And the man said, well, if I do only those things and I have Tawheed and I'm just genuinely a good person, will I get into paradise? And the Prophet said yes. After the man left, the Prophet said to the companions, radiallahu anhum, that if that man is genuine, we will see him in Jannah someday. And that's kind of a message that obviously your sunnahs are important. Obviously, we could all do with tightening up and learning on some new hadiths and new sunnahs. But
Allah's
don't,
not asking a lot of you, basically.
he's genuinely not. I mean, if you think about it, the only thing you outside of Tawheed, because if you didn't have that, you wouldn't really bother with the rest of it anyway. But like outside of praying, that's the only really thing that's technically like 100% mandatory. Because like fasting, if you're sick, you don't have to fast. If you're old or if you're young, you don't have to fast. Hajj is only if you can afford it, and so is zakat is only if you can afford it.
Yeah.
So essentially, I mean, obviously, I know a lot of people kind of use that as an excuse as to not kind of. It's like, oh, because
that's where the being genuine part comes in, right?
Yeah. So if you're being genuinely honest about it, I mean, prayer is the only thing that is 100% mandatory, and once you learn how to do that, like once you learn what you need to say and kind of the movements that you need to do, it's fine. So really, the only because that's why when I look at the term, like when people say like the liberal Muslims, for example, the you don't know what's in his heart type of people.
Yes.
And while that is true, you truly do not know what's in somebody's heart. The people who use that as an excuse for not praying, to me, that's when liberal becomes a synonym for the word lazy.
Yep, I agree.
I get obviously that potentially could be controversial to some people, and apologies in advance if I offend anyone who watches this. But that's just personally the way that I look at it, in the same sense that people who are trying to do every single thing at once, it's all. I don't use the term sucking up, but it almost seems like they're trying too hard to be a good Muslim. It's almost because they're trying to convince themselves that they're a good Muslim as opposed to convincing other people.
Let me tell you a story, right? When it came to the ruling of alcohol in Islam, right? Go back 1400 years. Obviously, before the Sahabas, before the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam became a prophet, of course, the Sahabas they weren't Muslims,
No.
So before Islam, they used to, and it was very common practice to drink alcohol. That's just one of the things. And when the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam established Islam and these lot, they converted to Islam, it's beautiful. Like Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, He understands how us human beings work, right? And what's interesting is that the first ruling that came of alcohol, it wasn't that you should never drink it. It was that, listen, as long as you're not drunk or intoxicated while you're going to the masjid to pray, you're calm. And then slowly, later on, right, more rulings were introduced, and eventually at the end of it, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala said that alcohol is an abomination of the devil. Do not drink it, period. Obviously, does that mean that it was an abomination of the devil in the beginning? Obviously it was. But Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, He brought it in slowly for the Sahabas, because He knew that, if he threw it at them right in the beginning, it would be hard for them. But slowly He took them off alcohol. And I think we should learn from that situation, especially how the Prophet ﷺ did it. Like, for example, slavery, in the beginning, like, slavery was something that when you look at Islamic history, it was something
prevalent in society.
It was prevalent in society. And there was a point in time when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ abolished slavery. He changed the institution, because he didn't start in a place, and that's the thing for us, right? Like Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he didn't start with an institution that didn't exist. He started with something that was already there, something that already had a mess of problems, and he had to change, he had to reform it. And same thing for us, we already have like you said, like the habit of, drinking alcohol, eating pork, etc. Like, for example, for me, I don't have any inclination to eat pork because I've never tasted it before in my life. I don't know what it tastes like, so I don't have that desire to eat it. But obviously someone who has tasted it, then they would. Who has the habit of it, they would. So definitely, I'd say like anyone who's watching and converting to Islam or thinking about converting, like Tahib said, take it one step at a time. If it's prayer, then pray one prayer a day, and slowly move it up to 5. There's nothing to say that you have to do everything at one go. And like Tahib said, the main point is that the main thing is taqwa, innit? It's that oneness in God. Get that sorted first, and then you will automatically start seeing other parts, other behaviors, come to light afterwards, and obviously learning more about Islam and etc.